Not too long ago, I received a call from one of my constituents, a new mom who had recently returned to work after having her first baby. She was looking for help because she had lost her health insurance. The short, unpaid breaks that she needed to pump her breast milk each day dropped her work hours slightly below the threshold to qualify for health benefits. She was faced with the impossible decision between making the healthy choice of breastfeeding her baby and providing health insurance for her family. So now we have asked other moms about their experiences returning to work while breastfeeding.
The breastfeeding overall went really well. I worked really hard ahead of time to kind of set things up with my employer so that I'd have the space and the time to be able to do so.
I feel fortunate that they do, because I do hear from a lot of people that they don't have the same luxuries that I do.
And even with an employer who was extremely supportive, it was still difficult to try to get time when you're a busy professional person to pump.
My experience going back to work, it was different.
I think I was really lucky in both of my situations. I know from speaking with other people that a lot of people don't have the accommodations that I did. I was working for a small company when I had my first child, and at the time I had my own office, and so when I returned to work I was able to pump in my office, so I just had to shut the door and close it, and I had all the privacy I needed.
But I was lucky because I had my own office.
Overall, the space was very functional. We had 2 different little cubed areas within a secured space, so the door was locked, so that was really nice.
There was no one area designed for pumping, so the librarian was nice enough to open a storage room for me, and there was a sink, and I was able to pump there, and she let me keep my pumping stuff, because every day dragging your stuff back and forth from classrooms to your office and back there, but there was no one assigned area.
At first they gave me an old shower room.
At first I was pumping in the classroom that I teach in, but then I decided to go into one of the nutritionist's office.
At the time when I was pumping, 2 other staff members were pumping. The nurse had to pump behind a curtain while she was waiting for kids to come anytime. There was another teacher who had to pump in the gym teacher's office. So we had to find our own space because there is no space for teachers to pump.
I had to pump like in a closet in the dean's office. So that was kind of like uncomfortable for me.
Returning to work, when I did home health, during home health care, I didn't really have any place to go. I didn't have a lactation room.
I did not have a refrigerator to store it, so I had to have like an ice pack inside my breast pumping bag.
And we had a refrigerator downstairs that I could use to store milk.
And I also had a space where I could place my breast milk inside of the refrigerator there.
This refrigerator is for everyone. It's for pumping mothers. It's for the general call center employees. So if they order pizza, if it's a party, pizza is in there, everything is in there. Everybody's lunch is in there. And I just have to make sure I put it somewhere where I know it's there. And I hope nobody takes my bag.
When I was out of the office, it was a little trickier. If I was at a courthouse, if I was doing my county board work, or if I was like at a training or something like that.
Sometimes I'd be training and the facility, the building just doesn't have a space that's appropriate for me. So I was pumping in empty office rooms, not secured, not sanitary.
I have had to sit on the floor of bathrooms, and that's not fun or very sanitary.
At that location, there were no accommodations for me. And so I did have to pump in the ladies' room.
I was there for a client meeting, and they didn't know what to do with me, and they put me actually in the nursery where they watch kids, and they had me sort of face the corner in a rocking chair. I feel like the space that they provide is very private.
People generally understood that when my door was closed in my first job where I was pumping, that I was unavailable. I had some friends that were also doing the same thing in their jobs, and they would have to put up a sign to indicate something was happening. People shouldn't knock on the door.
I was walked in on twice, and That was uncomfortable.
You had to walk through my office oftentimes to get to other parts of the office. So it was a matter of, you know, putting a sign on the door, do not come in, and I had windows. It was all windows, my office, so it was making sure, you know, that I had some privacy.
When I was just using one sign, I would get a lot of interruptions, and so I had to talk to my boss about that. And so I started using a doorknob handle, and then I also use a sign that says, "Go away, I'm breast pumping."
It was privacy because it was like a closet inside the dean's office, but it was a closet, so it wasn't very comfortable. Also, it was like I had to have her leave out her office in order for me to go into the closet, and then she had to put a note on the door so nobody came into the closet.
Then you have this whole thing to balance with your employer about when do I pump? Is there time to pump?
I work as a teacher, and finding time to pump was challenging with a teacher's schedule.
I just decided it's time for me to go pump, and I go pump.
We had half-hour time slots, and that was it. That was your window.
Thankfully, I have a group of women that I work with that are very caring, and they understand about breastfeeding. So if I have to leave to go pump, they're like, okay, go.
They had a company policy that I only had 15 minutes to pump.
When it gets to the 15-minute, I'm still having a large amount coming out, and I'm like, okay, well, I have to go back. So I start panicking.
I had to request for additional time to breastfeed. So I had to wind up doing like a medical request to ask for additional time to pump because I wasn't having enough time on my 15 minutes break.
I think knowing that my job offered the lactation room made it easy for me.
That I was able to continue to breastfeed my kids even when I went back to work, and I had a very supportive environment that enabled me to pump and enabled me to continue to make sure my kids got, you know, the best food that they could get when they were infants.
The fact that I was able to pump at work meant that when I did return, the process was a lot smoother. With my second child, I could have probably taken off a little bit more time with that particular position, but returning to work and being able to pump meant that I could send her to daycare and she'd have the breast milk that she needed.
Be able to continue producing milk for my baby, which was very important to us.
I actually was working 8 hours a day at my part-time job at first, so I had to cut it down to 4 hours instead of 8 so that I can get back to my baby to feed her because I didn't have the right things at the job in order to pump.
I wish that if I'd had more support that maybe that supply could have lasted longer.
If I didn't have a private space in my own office where I knew I could pump, I wouldn't have been able to return as quickly.
Sometimes I get teary-eyed about this because it was almost as though my employer made the decision for me to stop breastfeeding.
I probably would not be breastfeeding still at over 6 months postpartum and 6 months of age for my little Cora. You really can't go 8 hours a day and just breastfeed morning and night. Your body it doesn't work that way.
We know that breastfeeding leads to healthy outcomes for babies and mothers. Breastfeeding accommodations in the workplace make it possible for working moms to make the choice for themselves to keep working and the healthy choice for their babies.
We have heard from women all across the state about their experiences breastfeeding and returning to the workplace. Some have shared very positive stories, while others experienced significant obstacles.
This is why we have introduced the Healthy Babies Working Mothers Act, which would ensure that new moms can make the healthy decision to breastfeed their babies while providing economic security for their families.